I mean, it's usually the case, right? The lessons that we need the most are typically the toughest to learn, or, you learn the hard way. So I decided to put together a little bit of a list here. The 11 things that I believe were the most brutal lessons that I've learned, but some of the most important as well. And I find myself with my camera and a botanical gardens, north side of Houston, and I decided that, wow, what better way to talk about a renewing of life, a rebirth of life, so to speak, than the beginning of spring. Listen, I'm a sucker for a good cliche, of course. So I'm gonna snag some photos and some videos of some bees and some flowers and some unique trees. And in the meantime, we're gonna talk about these little lessons here.
Recalibrating my entire understanding of emotional intimacy and connection was necessary because normal, healthy relationships seemed boring and unfulfilling to me.
There you are. Come on now. There we go. That's a good shot. In my case, most of my relationships, as a matter of fact, almost all of them, had this level of insecurity and instability and chaos within them. Because I was like, what's the point? Like, a healthy relationship, you just sit around and not do anything? I thought it was totally normal to have such highs and lows, even within the first, couple of months. So true healthy relationships are a partnership, not a transaction. And so you're gonna have to get comfortable with your discomfort and ask yourself why you equate intensity with love.
I had to unlearn the concept of identity because up until then, I had mistaken my ego as my identity.
Now, I can't count how many times I've gotten in arguments in which I proudly, most appropriately, arrogantly exclaimed, "It is what it is, that's just who I am," and that is categorically wrong. Now, ego has been made out to be this bad thing, this other person with a lot of needs and wants. But in reality, it's just a filter. It's a filter in which you perceive the world and how you want the world to perceive you. Two simple questions you need to ask yourself in order to rid yourself of this ego filter. Number one, why? Number two, what? Why was I needing that apology? Why did I throw that tantrum? What is it that I really needed? When you remove yourself from that filter, you start to live with a lot more color, and you realize the categorical flaw in it is what it is. That's just who I am. You are not your thoughts nor your behaviors. You are merely the observer of them. So creating new thoughts and behaviors is ultimately a matter of choice.
I finally realized that processing emotions is a physical process, not a logical one.
After my worst breakup several years ago, the beginning of my healing journey career, so to speak, I was in the fetal position for a couple of weeks. Now, I did something unbeknownst to me at the time, which was revolutionary for me. I decided to absolutely immerse myself in feel everything. Don't try to rationalize anything. I had, friends and family try to rationalize stuff for me, and, they're trying to look out for the best of me, but I decided to forego any of the rationalization and just really understand my feelings, get to know them, and, hurt. Now, what I've since learned is that your emotional brain actually runs the entire show, not your logical brain. And processing emotions is a physical process. It's not something you can talk your way through. It's not something you can think your way through. It is a physical process. Now, like I said, at the time, I didn't know what I was really doing. I just wanted to do that, and that's what set off my healing journey. So you have to let your emotions do what they're supposed to do because, and I'll tell you this now, your emotions always have the right thing to say. And you can learn a lot from them. So get comfortable, become friends with your emotions.
Victim mentality affected virtually every decision I ever made, and I didn't even realize it.
Now, up until my mid-20s, I was always using my childhood traumas as an excuse, as a crutch. Of course, I'm like this. Like, obviously, this is who I am. I'm like this because I was raised like this. I was raised in this environment, and I was, abused and such. You can't hold me accountable for that. It's not my fault. I didn't deserve that. I was a victim. And there's many other instances in which you can find on a daily basis that you probably use that as a crutch. All this is happening to me. This sucks. I can't catch a break. Now, if you have ever felt like the world or your spouse or your friends or family are unjust, you're not alone. I mean, it's a very common thing to feel. However, the most difficult thing at least in my case, the most difficult thing I did was to take radical responsibility. Now, it takes a good bit of time, but it has been the most worthwhile part of the entire experience to take responsibility and avoid the feeling of the victim mentality.
If I wanted to truly heal, I had no choice but to take radical responsibility for my thoughts, actions, and beliefs.
I was having this fight with one of my exes, a particularly bad one. There was tears on both sides, and I found myself relenting. This is just who I am. I can't control this. I can't help that I was raised this way. You're just going to have to understand. Why can't you understand this is the way I am? After the inevitable breakup, I realized that I didn't want to be beholden to my father's traumas and his own life, because I have my own stuff to deal with, and I don't want to be trapped in this never-ending loop of blaming others for what I have to contribute to the situation or to my life or to my thoughts and beliefs. That's when I decided I want to take the biggest step I could as it comes to emotional responsibility, become my own man, and understand that I have control over exactly three things: my thoughts, my actions, and my beliefs. Now, don't get it twisted. This is real work. This takes a long time of concentrated effort. Now, it took me several years. Once you get to the point of being able to take complete responsibility of your thoughts, actions, and beliefs, the whole world starts to kind of make sense a little bit more, and you start feeling like, hey, nothing is happening to me. I am just reacting to it.
In order to gain any spiritual and emotional autonomy, I had to forgive all of my transgressors, both past and present.
Now, my father was mentally abusive and sometimes physically abusive, and was typically absent and mostly in trouble with the law. Now, it wasn't until I went to college until I realized this little shift in mindset, where I would find myself on an otherwise good day thinking about all the ways that he screwed up and all the ways that he could have done better. Now, eventually, I garnered the strength enough to forgive him for his perceived sins, not so much to let him off the hook, but to let me off the hook. Now, this may be difficult to conceive, but the more you think about all the ways that they could have done better, the more they are actively still hurting you, even though they may be years away from this whole situation, years or miles away from this entire situation. That's the goal here. Not so much to let them off the hook, but to let yourself off the hook in order for you to continue down your healing journey.
Watching the people you love screw up time and time again with the lessons that you've already learned never gets easier.
Hey, look at that. I found a chair that's big enough for me. Finally. Now, unfortunately, this is a bit of a self-explanatory lesson here, but it bears repeating, because the more you get along in your healing journey, the tougher this becomes, because you learn more lessons, and sometimes you'll see the same people doing the same thing years after you saw them do it the first time. And sometimes you just want to, shake them a little bit to wake them up, but unfortunately, they're going to do what they're going to do. And that's the lesson here. They know what's right, even though you're trying to tell them or sometimes convince them. You're just going to have to let them.
No matter what you believe, your brain will always find evidence to support that belief.
This was a bit of a kick in the shins, as far as I found out, because for the majority of my life, I not only told myself, but I firmly believed that I was just a pathological screw-up. And so things happened that always proved, hey, I'm a pathological screw-up, and nobody wants to stick around. Because if you are out looking for yellow cars, you're going to find yellow cars frickin' everywhere. So this rings true, even in the emotional setting. Now, one bit of a life hack that I've learned is that this also works in the opposite. So if you spend your time thinking that all people are bad, you're always going to find bad people. If you believe that most people are good, obviously not all people are good, but if you believe that most people are good, you're going to tend to find way more good people. I saw this practice online somewhere. Several different people were doing this, in which they were to tell themselves why today was the best day ever. They would find one reason, one thing. Like in my case, I came to a botanical gardens. I got some amazing footage here, like we have of these red passion flowers. This could go into my journal as one of the best days ever, because I was able to come get some amazing footage of these beautiful flowers. And unsurprisingly, they find life way more enjoyable. So let's do that.
Being self-aware of all my worst decisions and behaviors will always make me cringe, but that's where the lessons are.
If I had a nickel for every time I was blatantly disturbing somebody's peace, sometimes in public, I would have bought a frickin' one-way ticket to Mars years ago. Luckily I didn't though. Luckily I did start this healing journey and I had to do that because there's oxygen here. Now this lesson is particularly potent because this works whether you're the transgressor or the transgressed. I, in my case, most of the time was the transgressor. Now that's because of my childhood traumas, but I, for the most part, was the transgressor. And that's when I look back and I cringe. But now in that journey, in that healing journey, I learned to learn from those very vivid mistakes and take it on the chin. Because here's the thing, more often than not, you're going to realize that all those times you acted out, lashed out, reacted harshly, you're gonna find that it was probably your fault or your responsibility for those actions. That was a very tough pill for me to swallow. So, my lesson here is learn from the cringe, accept it, don't run from it.
As my values changed and my peace increased, I found that my friends and family list was dwindling.
This lesson hit me hard in a very bad way before I even started my healing journey about 10 years ago. I had a buddy, a best friend you could call him, who wrote me off. He just was tired of my crap. At the time I thought, man, this guy is outlandish, man, what's going on? We've been friends for 10 years, 12 years, and he just writes me off like sight unseen. After doing some digging in that situation, I realized that I was the one who was taking way too much from that friendship, giving almost nothing. And this ties back to some of the lessons we've learned earlier, giving almost nothing in return. And so one day he just reached the end of his rope and said, you know what, my peace is too valuable to deal with this crap. And I know this is a good friend of mine, but got to cut it off. To this day, we have patched up things, but we're not as close as we used to be. And that's okay. We've learned to value our own peace. So that's the lesson here. It's going to be really tough, and you might be on the receiving end of this, by the way. But you will lose friends and family the more you go on your healing journey and your values change, or in my case, become more valuable. And finally, number 11, no one can nor should love you as much as you can and should love you. This isn't so much of a brutal lesson as it is a tough one, because there's a lot of people out there that I've seen in the ether who have a very difficult time loving themselves or knowing how to love themselves. It took me a long time as well, because again, I was raised in a situation where self-deprecation that's just what you did, because that means you're humble. Nothing could be further from the truth, by the way. So take this as a sign to really do some diving into what it is that self-love means to you and how to go about doing it in your own way, because there's a lot of different ways you can love yourself and love others. But a very important lesson, you should love you more than anybody else should love you. Kids screaming in the background and planes flying above. Nothing says peace and garden quite like those things. Well, hey, listen, if you enjoyed this botanical and photography adventure, this botographical adventure, please consider subscribing. I'd love to have you here. And also, if there's anything that I missed or you felt like I missed in this list, please consider adding that into the comments. I'd love to read them and respond to them. And as promised, I will share some of my favorite photos from today. And one more thing before we go, in the description, I have a link to 7 brutally honest journal prompts that I personally use. I've compiled my favorite ones into this PDF. I think you're really going to like it. You'll be able to type on it. It's kind of a game changer, not going to lie. I truly enjoy the journaling process and what you learn about yourself, especially when you have no filter, right? That whole ego thing. So anyways, all that said, I will see you in the next video.